Well, we're talking to Stirling Moss, one of the great legends here, and one of the themes over the course of this weekend has been driver respect. We're sitting here, as you will probably hear, very, very close to the circuit, so there will be some background noise. But Stirling, there have been a lot of incidents recently in Formula One, young drivers, perhaps inexperienced young drivers, a lot of bumping and boring. In your day, it had to be done a little differently. The results could have been a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing you've got to have is respect of the other drivers, respect of the car, that sort of thing, and drive accordingly. I mean, we have had some drivers who are terrible. I mean, no two ways about it. Others who've been extremely good, and I think they're the ones we're most interested in. A driver who understands what racing's all about and drives accordingly.
See, in your day, your height in the 50s and early 60s, you were losing drivers quite rapidly anyway. It was several per season being killed. And you didn't bang wheels because that could be disastrous.
Yeah, well, I mean, in those days, motor racing is a dangerous sport anyway. And there's no doubt that a lot of drivers did die at that time, mainly because of either mechanical failure or maybe driver incompetence.
What we're seeing now are drivers on a very, very shortened path into a Formula One cockpit. Now, you had a number of years in the sport before you got your first F1 drive, and I think your dad had to buy the car anyway.
Yeah, I've been driving quite a long time with John Heath and driving different cars, and my father went to see Mercedes, see if they'd sign me up the following year, because the rumour went round that they were coming back. And they said, well, we've seen Stirling driving some pretty awful cars. We'd like to see him in something that's competitive. So my father went down to Maserati, because Ferrari wouldn't sell cars then,
No.
not to private people. And went to Maserati, bought a 250F, and I'm glad to say that's what really helped me. I think my best bit of luck on that was that I went to Berne, which is a very difficult circuit. And at Berne I managed to, in the wet, get the fastest lap of anybody, including the Mercedes Fangio, and that's what Neubauer then signed me up to race with them the following year.
Well, as I say, you'd had an early start. Once you got off the horses and let your sister get on with the horses, you then went into, well, I suppose what is the equivalent of karting today, because you went into the Coopers.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, cars didn't exist in those days, and we had what was called Formula 3, which was 500cc engines. A really good Beat, for instance, would give about 53 horsepower, and they were really quite fast and good racing, because the drivers were very competitive. I mean, because of the way the vehicles were, you didn't get anybody with a lot more horsepower than anybody else, so it was good racing.
Well, you were hill climbing even before then. I think that's pretty much where you started, was hill climbing.
Well, hill climbing, you've got to remember that after the war, of course, we didn't have racetracks. Goodwood hadn't been built by then, and therefore it meant one had to go to hills and sometimes sprints, just a straight out sprint, and that was the start of motor racing following the war.
But that was quite a long learning experience. Whereas now what we're seeing is young lads, 17 in a Formula One cockpit, and you start to think, well, yes, he may be very quick, but how much experience has he actually got at 17?
Well, this is a good point. I mean, thank God now that the cars are much safer than they were, and the drivers are strapped in. I mean, I personally never ever raced strapped in a car unless it was a saloon. But now, of course, the cars are much better built and so on, and if a guy is strapped in carefully, then he should be all right, even if he has a bit of a shunt.
The thing is, we're seeing with some of the younger drivers, they're coming up from the karts very fast. And karting, there's a lot of rough and tumble, and they're very young, inexperienced drivers. But if they're taking the rough and tumble into 200 mile an hour plus cars, it's a different game they're playing.
Yeah, well, they certainly pay more attention to it. That's for sure. When you start talking of high speeds, anything over 150 is fairly fast, and you can have a massive shunt if anything goes wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of kinetic energy there to dissipate, isn't there, if you hit anything, which is why I think everybody's getting a little bit anxious about the drivers pushing each other about. That's really, really not a good idea.
No, I think the RAC, I think, controls as much as they possibly can. I mean, I'm sure there are drivers out there who've lost their license or the use of a license for a certain time and will hopefully learn by it and come back and be safer.
I think it's always been the case that the young chargers might play a little bit rough with the guys that have been in the sport a long time, and I can remember people like Alonso when he first came in, pushing Michael Schumacher out of the way, basically. Yeah. And I think that's always been the case, but perhaps they're being a little too aggressive now. One or two of the moves we've seen this season, really risky.
I mean, the thing you've got to remember, of course, is it's a very, very competitive business. And guys are out there trying to make a name for themselves, get a reputation and so on. And that's one important thing to remember. I mean, we need fast drivers. I mean, motor racing is going to survive on fast drivers, and they're exciting to watch. There's no two ways about it. A really good driver is, if you watch a full race, is very exciting.
And one of the reasons I mention Fernando Alonso is because I know you regard him quite highly, as you do Lewis, as chargers, but they're chargers that they don't go crashing into all and sundry. And generally speaking, they don't try and push their teammates off as well.
No, I mean, the manners amongst the really top drivers is pretty good. I mean, I really can't remember the last time I saw Lewis, for instance, make a big mistake like that. Sometimes he has not a very good start, but he's not a wild driver. Same with Alonso. The same goes actually with all the top drivers. The one thing they need is smoothness and speed, and most of them have got that.
I'm tempered by some respect for other drivers' abilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Which doesn't seem necessarily to be the case with some of the youngsters, which is why we are getting a little concerned about whether the number of rungs on the ladder to get to Formula One has shrunk to too few.
Yeah, but to get to Formula One is difficult, and it should be difficult. It has to be difficult. I mean, that's the way the sport is run. And if a driver is a really good driver and knows how to handle his cars and so on, he'll come to the surface and get recognised, and then join a team that can give him the opportunity of winning.
We are still seeing, I think, some instances of drivers that are there perhaps a little more because they bring a lot of money than because they bring a lot of ability. That was worse a few years ago. I think it's improving slightly, but people like this young German Wehrlein seems to have virtually no money, but he's got a lot of talent.
Yeah, the thing with our sport, I think, is at least these guys get recognised fairly early. And if they behave themselves and do a decent job, there's no limit to what they can achieve.
I mean, I know you go to quite a lot of the Grand Prix as an honoured guest. Do you still actually enjoy watching it?
Yes, I do. If the camera work is so good now and all that sort of stuff. Now, I think if you sit down for a good race, now not all races are exciting anyway, so therefore that rules that lot out. Yeah. But otherwise, I think many of the races are really good to watch, and I enjoy watching it. I mean, when you're looking at it on the box, you've got somebody like Martin telling you things you wouldn't find out otherwise, and so it makes it an interesting way of watching Formula One.
One of the things I've noticed this year is most of the directors covering Formula One wouldn't put cameras at low level on the cars, because the lower the level, the nearer to the driver's eye line, the more the sensation of speed is. But they seem to be doing it more this season. I personally enjoy it, but some people are a bit queasy about it. When you see those corners coming at you and the camera is on the side of the helmet virtually, you're seeing it as the drivers are actually seeing it.
That's showbiz, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you're giving the viewer something more to look at, something more interesting, and so the person who's really deeply into motor racing can follow the technique and the skill of the driver who he's watching.
Well, I know along similar lines, we've had a conversation before about extraordinary eyesight. And one of the things that has amused me over the last couple of seasons has been David Coulthard he's obviously watching the same TV screen image as we are, yet he's able to read the driver's dash and not just the gears. He's got all the sector times and everything.
Yeah, well, he's got quite a lot of experience, hasn't he? That's the point. And I think if he brings that to the screen, that's a good thing.
So are you enjoying the current coverage?
Yes, I think I do. I mean, we watch a mixture of, depending what's on, whether it's on Sky or whatever. But we try to follow up and see as much of Formula One as we can.
Well, it seems to me that you still bring a valuable insight to much of it, which is why I come and ask you questions, but why a lot of other people come and ask you, what do you think of what's going on at the moment? Because you had the experience, but also you were able to analyse what's going on. Some of your colleagues are less good at that.
Well, I must say I'm not frightened to say what I think, and I think that's quite important that one should be, realistic and open, critical, or believing what you're watching is really good TV. And I must say that if they've got a good producer and well-sighted cameras, no reason why motor racing can't look and appeal to the public very, very much so.
Well, to end with, and thank you for your time, but I'm going to ask you one very provocative question. What do you think about the sale of the rights, Formula One rights, and the position of Bernie in the future?
I think the sport will miss Bernie. I think he's done a tremendous amount for the sport. He has a lot of people who criticise him, but the point is he was a dictator, and to move things forward, boy, you need a dictator. I personally think he did a tremendous job, and hopefully the 3 years may extend. You never know.
Thank you very much, Stirling. It's much appreciated.